Start with Why: How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. The global bestseller by Simon Sinek. So I am now 5 chapters into Start with Why by Simon Sinek, and I'm really liking it so far. I'm actually going to start with chapter 2, because chapter 1 is basically like the TED Talk. In chapter 2, Simon outlines some of the common manipulations that companies will use to get us to buy things. So things like price, promotions, fear, aspirations, peer pressure, and novelty. And if you want an example of one of these, you don't have to look far. Just on the cover of Simon's own book is the global bestseller. That's an example of peer pressure. Simon's publisher is basically saying to those people in the bookstore, hey, a lot of people like this book. You should read it too. And Simon is not saying that these strategies don't work. In fact, he's saying all of these strategies work. The difference is they're not all sustainable. All they're doing is getting you over that last hurdle. If, say, you're comparing product A and B, if product B comes with an extra carrying case or some extra add-on, or maybe it's on a 10% discount, that gives you a reason to buy product B over product A. But Simon does have a beef with these tactics, and his beef is that over-reliance on these manipulations can cause your product to start to look like a commodity. This line of thinking reminded me a lot of Casey Neistat's Guide to Filmmaking, that if you want to make a great film, story is all that matters. Yes, good gear, better actors, and special effects can make your video better, but they're no substitute for story. The best they can do is enhance the story by maybe bringing the audience in a little bit better or creating a better sense of immersion. And it makes sense. If story didn't matter, then stock footage sites would be Fortune 500 companies. In reality, though, if you go to a stock footage site and search for something, all the clips you get back, they might be different. Some of the details won't be the same, but in effect, without story, you don't really have a reason to care about any one of them. The next chapter I wanted to talk a bit about was chapter 4. Chapter 3 was interesting, but I thought chapter 4 was worth talking about. In this chapter, Simon tries to explain the biological reasoning for why his approach is effective. He likens his golden circle concept to the actual structure of the brain. And to be honest, I didn't really buy that argument. I mean, I get it, but I'm not sure why Simon felt the need to bring geometry into this. Since the limbic system is number 1, you might as well just say, if it's the most important thing to drive behavior, it's also the most important thing to appeal to that part of the brain. But anyways, later in this chapter, he talked about belonging. He says when you buy a product from Apple, you're actually not just buying it because you believe it has better features. You're also buying it because it says something about you and your values. You're not buying an Apple product because you think the screen is better or it has better battery life or any of that. You're buying it because it says that you think different. It says something about you. It says something about your values and the people you like to spend time with. And that's how it creates a sense of belonging. You're actually paying a premium for that sense of belonging. And even though maybe certain aspects of the product are actually inferior, what the product says about you makes it worth having. One thing I noticed is that Simon doesn't really try to establish credibility in the traditional way. Normally, if you've gotten a couple chapters into a book, the author will at some point have said that they've spent X number of years doing the thing the book is about. But even without that, Simon does a great job of connecting with the reader on an emotional level. But I suppose that could just be my limbic brain talking. And that brings us to our final section, early criticisms. And I don't have many. I really like this book. It's not clear who this book is for. Because like on the cover of the book, Simon talks about great leaders, but in the actual book itself, we spend a lot of time talking about companies and how companies choose to sell things. And so it's not really like a practical guide. The message is clear. The message of why you should start with why that's clear, but how it translates into leadership isn't super obvious. It's not obvious how someone would practically apply this advice in their own life. And with that, what do you think of the book so far? Go in the comment section below, tell me how far along you've read and what thoughts you have. My next video will be the full review of Start With Why, so I better go and get reading. I'll see you there.